Once upon a time, in a small cottage near the edge of a dark forest, there lived a poor woodcutter, his wife, and his 2 children, Hansel and Gretel. The family was struggling to survive, as they had very little money and almost no food. The stepmother, who was a cruel woman, often complained about the children. One evening, the children overheard a conversation between their father and stepmother. The stepmother said, "There is not enough food for all of us. Tomorrow, we must take Hansel and Gretel deep into the forest and leave them there. They will never find their way back, and we will have enough to eat." The father was very sad and replied, "How can I leave my children alone in the forest? Wild animals will eat them." But the stepmother convinced him, and reluctantly, he agreed. Hansel and Gretel had heard everything. Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. "Don't worry, Gretel, I will think of something." That night, when everyone was asleep, Hansel sneaked outside. The moonlight made the white stones on the ground shine brightly. He collected as many as he could and put them in his pocket. The next morning, the stepmother woke the children early and said, "We are going to the forest to gather wood." She gave them each a small piece of bread, but it was hardly enough to fill their stomachs. As they walked deeper into the forest, Hansel dropped the shiny stones one by one along the path. When they reached the middle of the forest, the stepmother told the children to wait while she and their father gathered wood. But after a while, it became clear that they were not coming back. Hansel and Gretel were scared, but Hansel said, "Don't worry. When the moon rises, we will find our way home." When night came, the moonlight illuminated the stones Hansel had dropped. The children followed the trail of stones all the way back to their cottage. Their father was happy to see them, but the stepmother was furious. A few days later, she said to their father, "This time, we must take them even deeper into the forest. They will never find their way back." The children overheard this again, but this time Hansel couldn't gather stones because the door was locked. Instead, he used breadcrumbs from his small piece of bread to mark the path. The next morning, the stepmother led them farther into the forest. Hansel dropped breadcrumbs along the way, hoping to use them as a trail back home. But when they tried to follow the trail, they discovered that birds had eaten all the crumbs. Lost and hungry, Hansel and Gretel wandered through the forest for hours. Just as they were about to give up, they saw a strange house in the distance. The house was made of gingerbread, candy, and chocolate. "Look, Gretel, a house made of sweets," Hansel said. The children ran to the house and began to eat pieces of it. They were so hungry that they didn't notice an old woman watching them from inside. Suddenly, the door opened, and the old woman stepped out. "Who is eating my house?" she asked with a smile. The children were scared, but the woman said kindly, "Come in, my dears. You must be hungry and tired." The children followed her inside. The house was warm and cozy, and the table was filled with delicious food. The woman gave them milk, bread, and cake. Hansel and Gretel thought they were safe, but the old woman was actually a wicked witch. The next morning, the witch locked Hansel in a cage. "I will fatten you up and eat you," she said. She made Gretel her servant, forcing her to cook and clean the house. The witch checked Hansel every day to see if he was getting fatter. But Hansel tricked her by showing her a thin bone instead of his finger. The witch had poor eyesight and thought Hansel was still too thin to eat. After weeks, the witch grew impatient. "I can't wait any longer. I will eat you today, she shouted. She told Gretel to heat the oven. The clever Gretel pretended not to understand. I don't know how to check if the oven is ready, she said. The witch became angry and said, You silly girl, let me show you. As the witch leaned into the oven, Gretel pushed her inside and shut the door. The witch screamed, but Gretel didn't let her out. The witch was burned in the oven, and the children were finally free. Gretel freed Hansel from the cage. Together, they searched the witch's house and found treasure, gold coins, jewels, and other valuables. They put as much as they could carry into their pockets and left the house. After walking for hours, they finally found their way out of the forest. When they returned home, their father was overjoyed to see them. He told them that their stepmother had left, and they would never be hungry again. With the treasure from the witch's house, they lived happily ever after. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. Now tell me in the comments, which fairy tale would you like to hear next? I can't wait to see your suggestions. See you in the next video.